Ladies of Reddit, what is the creepiest guy you have ever come in contact with? A few years ago, I went out to a cocktail bar with a girlfriend of mine. We had just finished work and wanted to have a nice drink, not a rowdy drunk night. This place has a smallish dance floor with a band, so after our drink, we were just talking or dancing on the dance floor. A guy comes up to us and starts talking, and he seems like a really nice guy. We all end up sitting in a booth just talking for another hour or so and exchange numbers. The next day, he sends me a text asking for my email as he wanted to send me something. That something was a 50-page novella about how we met, how I seduced him and made him fall in love with me. All written in first person, and including lines like, "You stared at me from across the bar, I could see it in your eyes, the fire in your loins," and "I could barely hear the words as I stared at your wet, luscious lips." Needless to say, I texted him back saying that it made me very uncomfortable and that we should probably not hang out. Long story short, I was 14 and he was 23. He had a picture of me on his nightstand and wrote me a letter talking about how he loves me and telling me about our future together. Before the letter, I had never seen him or spoken to him. Apparently, he was my mom's friend's brother and saw me from his car once when he went to go pick up his sister. I was at a water park and I saw this guy forcing a kid into the men's bathroom. The kid kicked the guy and ran away. After that, I watched the guy walk around looking at other kids who were by themselves. I told security. Later that day, I saw them escorting him out of the park. I seriously pray that he didn't hurt anybody before security found him. I used to go meet my then boyfriend after work most nights as we lived a 15-minute walk away and in a relatively safe neighborhood. One night, I walked down and forgot my phone at home. But I figured it would be fine as I have never needed it in the past. He ended up finishing his shift early and, thinking I hadn't left to meet him yet, headed home on a different route. When I got there, I didn't see anything wrong. There was obviously someone inside. All the lights still on. Later found out they were a cleaner. So I sat down on the curb and waited for close to an hour. As I was about to leave, a truck pulls up with 3 very intoxicated men inside. They start catcalling and I ignored them at first until they start getting more aggressive in their advances. Eventually, I turned to see if anyone at all was leaving the restaurant, and I hear one of them say, "Nobody's going to save you now," as they begin to park nearby. I was able to run to the nearest 24-hour grocery and let someone know, but it was probably the creepiest, scariest thing anyone has ever said to me. At my old job, office setting, this guy, let's call him Stan, would always flirt with every female in the office. He was married, has kids, was on the older side, and was just generally gross. I worked the front desk, so I probably got it the most, but thankfully not the worst. One day, a bunch of us were talking in the break room, just ladies. He walks in and overhears one of us say that she lost some weight. He walks up, picks her up by the shoulders and says, "Atta girl." Then he full-on kisses her on the mouth and puts her down like it was no big thing. We were all stunned. I couldn't help but say, "What the, Stan?" And he just kind of walks out of the room as if he was offended by my remark. Long story short, that was his last day, was fired. We were all so glad to never see him again. I was out with my friend to see a blues show, and another couple were seated at our table. They were just friends as well. The guy was quite charming and I told him a bit about myself. The first warning should have been that he tracked me down at my college through the university phone system by trying every girl with my first name. Long story short, we agreed to meet at another concert. He was 35 minutes late because he was watching a basketball game, so I was already done with him, but decided to finish the show and part ways. I was wearing a white shirt and he suddenly turned toward me and said, "You'd look awesome wearing this beer." He poured his entire beer down the front of my blouse, rendering it see-through. I just stood there shocked for a second and walked out. In a city of 6 million people, no kidding, he ended up being my waiter at a restaurant about a year later. He said, "You look familiar." I assured him we had never met and never went back to that restaurant. Creep-o-rama. This guy in high school who sat behind me kept a bag of my stray hairs that had fallen out throughout the year. He then proceeded to give it to me the last day of the year. No. When I was like 12, a van once pulled up next to me when I was walking home. The passenger rolled the window down, did that hand motion meaning come here, and was holding a plastic bag with something in it, and opened his door. So I ran away quickly up the hill by the street and disappeared into the tangle of local apartments, keeping an eye on where the van was driving to ensure they wouldn't follow me. Scary stuff. I wish I got their license plate number. Not a lady, but a bouncer in a club. A younger girl came in, 18 or so, college kid, and said her abusive ex-boyfriend was following her around. He was a local amateur photographer who went by the colorful name Skulls. He tried to come in and we banned him from the club. He got a new younger girlfriend that he ended up strangling to death. The guy got 30 years. We once had a substitute teacher for our girls' PE class who looked like he was in his mid-50s, early 60s. Basically, every time we had to go for a run, everyone in my class would feel like someone was staring at us. And oh boy, when one of us would actually turn around and look, he's there, looking at God knows what part of our bodies with a creepy grin. After a few months, he was back as a sub again, and this time, I accidentally tripped over my own foot and twisted my ankle. He, alongside one of my friends, helped me up and were bringing me to the office. At that point, I had each of my arms around both of them so I don't put pressure on my injured foot. Now, what he did during that time still gives me the creeps every time I remember it. He slowly snaked his hand around my waist and stopped just right above my butt, but even then, he'd slowly move it up and down in small motions as if he was feeling me up. I clearly remember how my face contorted in disgust, extreme discomfort. I just wanted to get away from him right there and then. Thankfully, my other friend felt the signs of my discomfort and supported most of my weight away from the creepy sub. And as a normally squeamish person, I've never been more relieved in my life to finally be alone in a room with a nurse. This all happened a few years ago when I was about 12 to 13 years old, and I have stopped taking PE last year when it finally became an elective in grade 11. I have not encountered the sub in my school since I hurt my ankle, and I hope I never will. Once I was at a water park and a group of little girls was playing with a water cannon. They were jumping and shrieking and laughing, and they were super cute. I noticed a guy videotaping them and wondered if he was related since he was a different race. I stood up and went to the top step of the pool, which blocked his view, and he stepped to the side. So I did too, figuring if he was a parent he would ask me to quit. He turned around and started filming the opposite direction. I went and sat back down and picked up my book, but watched him behind my sunglasses and he turned back to them with a camera. So I stood up again and began walking toward him to ask if he was with them. And he turned and immediately left the park alone at a fast pace. Super creepy. When I was 8, I was playing in my front yard alone. My mom was inside taking a nap. I was standing by my front porch when a car pulled up and stopped on the street. A man got out and began to walk into my yard holding a piece of paper. He was smiling and asked me if I could help him find a place because they were lost. He held out the piece of paper and asked me to look at the map and see if I could point them in the right direction. At one point, he looked behind him at the man in the car, so I looked behind him as well and noticed that the driver looked terrified. He was fidgeting in his seat and looking all around. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Why would a grown man stop and ask an 8-year-old girl for directions? And why did the driver look so worried? As I was putting it together, the man began to walk further into my yard. I sprinted into my backyard and into my house. I locked the door and ran to the window to see the car squeal away. I have never been so scared. I went and laid in bed with my mom shaking until she woke up. I was spending a summer in Italy studying at the university in Rome. One day, I decided to take a shortcut back to my apartment. My apartment was near the Colosseum, so I figured that if I got lost, all I would have to do is ask where the Colosseum was, or look for signs, and I would be fine. My normal path to and from work cut through the main entrance of the Roma Termini and went down a bunch of crowded streets to get to the university. The new path, picked out by map, took me through a more residential area, but eventually the residential area gave way to the abandoned side of the train tracks. There were a ton of homeless people and wayward-looking youths, and I realized that I'd landed myself in a really rough neighborhood. So I tried to keep my head held up high like I knew what I was doing, avoid making eye contact, and ignore the stares. Running perpendicular to the train tracks was a tunnel for cars to go through with pedestrian sidewalks on each side. I was making my way through this dark, creepy tunnel when I heard someone come up behind me. I was already tense, but I tried to relax. He gave me a wide, toothy smile and said something in a weird language. I shook my head at him and told him in Italian that I didn't understand him. He didn't let up. I considered flagging down a passing car, but I told myself I was just panicking and needed to be more firm. Maybe, I thought, I can try a different language and this time tell him to leave me alone. I tried Italian again, English, and then Spanish, getting really desperate. I tried Hebrew and Arabic. Nothing. He just gave me this vicious grin and kept speaking rapidly in some language I didn't recognize while moving closer and closer to my side. Once I got out of the tunnel, I could still practically feel his breath on the back of my neck. I'm seriously panicking by that point, but the part of Rome that I was in looked really abandoned. I didn't see any pedestrians or stores around, so I had no clue what to do. I got to a street corner and stopped for just a minute to collect myself, and Cheshire Guy saddled up right beside me. I was calming down, hoping it was some cultural miscommunication, until he grabbed the hem of my dress and started to tug it upwards. Now I freaked out and smacked his hands away with my purse. He grabbed one of my hands and brought me towards him, but I screamed, "No!" and walloped the side of his head with my bag, which had my laptop in it. He looked kind of dazed, but I swear to God he still kept that huge grin on his face and still kept rambling in that strange language. I was petrified and no one was around. Once he let go, I took off in a sprint and he followed right behind. I couldn't go very fast because I had to pay close attention to the street signs. The last thing I wanted to do was get lost. I felt my eyes start to tear up when I slowed down and realized he was still right beside me. He reached for my dress again and, once again, I took off in another sprint. After about 2 kilometers, he had probably been following me for about 3 at that point. I saw a grocery store and immediately ran inside. Cheshire Guy is still behind me, so I run up to the first people I see, 2 Italian girls around my age. I explained to them that this man I didn't know had been following me for a while now, and I couldn't understand him or get him to go away. Italians, bless them, are some of the kindest, most helpful people in the world. The girls immediately get this serious face and start talking to the man. Suddenly, he's speaking perfect Italian and claiming that I'm his girlfriend and we had just got into a fight and I was trying to get him into trouble. He says that they need to back off, basically, and let him take me home. The girls didn't believe him, of course, and one girl ran to get the manager while the other called the police. The guy left after he realized he'd been caught. The manager watched the security cameras to make sure he left, but told me to stay in the store for at least another half hour to be sure the man wasn't waiting somewhere close by. It didn't matter anyway since the police were on their way and I had to wait for them. The police arrived, I gave them my report and a description of the man and they gave me a ride back to my apartment. I never saw Cheshire Man again and the police never followed up with me. And I never took the shortcut back from work again. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, please leave a like and comment down below if you have any suggestions for the next videos. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel as well for more videos like this one. See you in the next video.